Love thy neighbor that votes differently than you. Love thy neighbor that has a different skin color than you. Hello, everyone. It is always an honor to be asked to preach. And before I begin, I would like to say thank you to Father Gregory Mansfield for again giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts with you, my family that I love very much. So I would like to start with a story. So hold on. Now this happened many years ago. I was helping a friend of mine move her belongings from one apartment to a house that she just purchased. I'm driving and she's driving behind me, and there was this car in front of me. Now, for whatever reason, this car was driving incredibly slow. I was tired and I was frustrated, and I honked the horn real loud. And then the person did some signals with his hands outside of the window, and for whatever reason, I took them a little bit aggressively. And after much honking, he finally moved to the side to let me pass. Because how dare he not do it before? Moments later, there was a red light. And in a very embarrassing way, karma decided to put us both side by side. I proudly looked forward and tried my best to not look at him directly. And at that moment, the gentleman put his window down. Now I could see through the side that he put the window down, and I realized he was trying to get my attention. I still looked forward proudly because, I didn't see anything. The gentleman wanted to talk to me, so he said to me, "Sir, I'm sorry that I was going a bit slow back there. There's something wrong with my car. I guess the car had some type of malfunction." And I realized that what I did was probably not very nice. And I said to him, "I think that the one that has to apologize is me, not you to me." And in this long red light, or at least it felt like it was a long red light, because we were both really just starting this conversation. And we kept on apologizing to each other. And it was probably one of the nicest conversations that I've ever had. And I apologized to him again, and then we just went on our way. At that moment, two strangers decided to not just apologize to each other, but put aside whatever differences we probably had. We just said hello to each other. We were nice to each other, at least at the end, or at least I was nice at the end. But if you think about it, or at least the way I think about it, this has to do with love. That love that we have for our neighbor. And having love for our neighbor also has to do with the word stranger. Because we use the word stranger where the word neighbor maybe just sounds a bit better. Because, words matter. I think that the word stranger, if we look at it from a Christ-like perspective, think about it. Do we really have strangers? In this world, we only have family. We don't have strangers. I get it. It's a bit difficult concept to maybe grasp, because some neighbors are just not very nice. Some neighbors you might even think, you really suck. Especially that noisy neighbor that likes to make noise, especially when you're trying to really sleep that night because you have to wake up early the next morning and it's like, ah! All night. Yeah, that neighbor. That's your brother, that's your sister. That's your neighbor, not a stranger. Everyone deserves, or at least the way I see it, in a Christ-like perspective, everyone deserves the same respect. Because love goes both ways, but even if it does not come from the other side, as a Christian, we have that responsibility that we gotta at least give it from our side. And if it doesn't come back, that's fine. Leave it to Jesus. Now, you might be asking yourself, what does this have to do with the gospel of today of Matthew? Well, it does, family, it does. It is all about loving God while respecting your neighbor as yourself. As difficult at times as it is, let's do it. The Pharisees decided to question Jesus in the gospel. And maybe we can say that they even kind of try to trick him a bit. with the question, and they said, "Teacher, which commandment is the law?" I think they were probably trying for him to talk against the law so they can have an excuse to do something to him. Which law is the greatest? And I think they thought they cornered him. And I like to imagine that at that moment, Jesus was thinking silently in his head, wait a minute, you want to trick me, but don't worry. And then Jesus answers, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. In these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Pretty powerful words for someone that they probably thought they cornered. If you think about it, Jesus had many options when he came to this type of answer. He probably could have said, hey, you got a bunch of 600 something laws in Leviticus. Or maybe, hey, let's go to the 10 Commandments. But no, he decided to pretty much put everything together and then deliver it in these beautiful commandments to us. And let me read it again. Got to put this in our minds and in our hearts. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You should love your neighbor as yourself. Put God first, then love your neighbor. No pressure, right? Even though these words from our Lord Jesus Christ, even though they are beautiful, they are so much easier said than done. Being a Christian is not a membership in some nice fancy club, nothing against fancy clubs, where you wear your little insignia on a shirt or a nice little polo, and you pay your dues on Sunday, and then when Monday comes, that's it. Nothing changes, because you already paid your dues on Sunday. See, that's not necessarily what Jesus is motivating us to do, or calling us to do. Being a Christian is a lifestyle that we have chosen by faith because we believe that the words of Christ inspires us to be the best version of ourselves in the world, and because the love of Jesus is so incredible that living without him makes no sense at all. In the rule of the BSG, Brotherhood of St. Gregory, where I belong as a friar, or also the word regla, there is a sentence that fills me with a lot of love, and I believe it fits very well with what we're trying to talk about right now. And these are the words. Listen to them carefully. It is, in fact, to live in such a way that life itself will have no reason if it were not for the presence of Christ's redeeming love. Let me tell you one more story. I know, I already told you another one, but let's go with the second one. Plus Father Mansfield does it too, so I'm going to do it. Let me tell you one more. So, I went to school in Sanford, Florida, back in the year 1990, 1991. I was in kindergarten or first grade, I really don't remember. At the time, I was introduced to this new concept. You might laugh at this. Is the concept of a school bus. In Puerto Rico, we have school buses, but it's a common practice for parents to drive their kids to school, not to be picked up by school buses. So to me, it was really cool to be in this big bus full of my friends. And at the time, I just moved from Puerto Rico. So my English was pretty much non-existent. At the time, I also did not know that I had dyslexia, and I would later develop a severe speech impediment for many years and a severe stuttering problem. All of them together. In a strange place, speaking a strange language. So it made English a bit difficult. During my bus rides, I remember being told that I was not allowed to speak in the bus. I followed the instructions. I was a good kid, at least at the time. And for a while, until I started to notice that the other kids were not doing the same thing that I was. I had a friend that seemed to know a couple of words in Spanish, and she would relay the message every single time to me at the instruction of the bus driver. But I decided to talk anyways. I mean, I was a kid after all. And I remember asking my friend many times in Spanish, of course, why was I not allowed to speak in the bus? But my friend said that it made the lady bus driver very upset, but she never explained why. I don't really think she understood either. Until one day, my questioning was met with a very scary incident. When the bus driver decided to stop the bus in the middle of the highway, I remember like it was yesterday, and she came back into the back of the bus where I was allowed to sit, and she reprimanded me by yelling at me. Mind you, she was yelling at me in a language that I did not yet understand. I felt horrible about this because I really could not understand what she was trying to say. But even though I was a kid, I understood the anger because the anger was in her face. And she looked at me like if I was kind of disgusting. She was repulsed by my presence, like if I was something dirty. I can still remember that the other kids will try their best not to interact with me because of fear of the bus driver. They would all talk to each other and laugh and have fun, you know, like kids do in a bus. But I just sat silent in fear of getting in trouble. This happened for a couple of months. That day when I arrived at home, as per usual, my dear mother that I love would always do what I used to call the interview. And she would ask me about how was school, how was lunch, what did you have for lunch? And I would always be excited. I'm like, oh my God, they serve pizza. Because in Puerto Rico, they serve more rice and beans than anything else. Healthier food, actually, just the way it is. And how were your classes, Mom asked? And how was your homework? And like a good mom, she noticed that I seemed a bit upset. So she asked, what's wrong? And like, Mom she's very persistent. And I really, for whatever reason, did not want to tell her because I was confused about this whole situation. I thought I was going to get in trouble. But finally, I did tell my mother, and my mother understood immediately what was happening, and she decided to go to school. I was a kid, and I did not know any better, but the fact that I was a kid that spoke a different language, for whatever reason, scared this lady. I know that after my mother complained about it and went to the school, and was stopped by security because Mom was going to get in the bus, and who knows what was going to happen. I think Mom was probably going to drag her by the hair, but security caught her before that happened, thank God. The lady, I guess, was reprimanded, but she kept on driving me home in the same bus for the rest of the year, and I kept on sitting in the same seat in the back. But this time I was allowed to say a word or two, but her eyes were always on me in that big, long, skinny mirror. You could see her piercing blue eyes just looking at me every single time I shared a word with someone. But I kept on talking because I'm Angel. I will always remember this experience like it happened yesterday. I've always been curious, how can a mature lady, maybe in her 50s, could be so afraid of a 6-year-old child speaking in Spanish or in any other language? This type of stories still happen to this day, and some have some horrible consequences. I believe that we celebrate diversity. We should remind ourselves, when we think about these stories, that God is within this beautiful diversity. Because at least for me, God is diverse himself. As we celebrate Latino heritage, do yourself a favor. Get to know your neighbors more. Neighbors, not strangers. Through Zoom or whatever safe manner you can. Read good books about diversity, culture, anti-racism, indigenous history. Read about the slave trade, among other books. Attend podcasts, Zoom meetings, book clubs. Get involved. Even if it is online, you don't have to leave the house to get involved. If you don't understand terms like Black Lives Matter, or because you think a friend told you something, do your own research. Or ask someone that is outside getting involved, like myself, or many others in your congregation or friends on Facebook. Reach out. Get to know your neighbors, genuinely. Get to know their stories. Latinos, get to know Black culture. During these times of political conversations and so much passionate conversation about politics, Don't let anything, any of this rhetoric, really bad rhetoric, because rhetoric is supposed to be in an orderly form. Don't let that stand in between that love that we have for each other. Love thy neighbor that thinks differently than you. Love thy neighbor that worships differently than you. Love thy neighbor that speaks a different language, como español. Love thy neighbor that uses a different holy text, like the Quran. Love thy neighbor that dresses differently than you. Love thy neighbor that votes differently than you. Love thy neighbor that has a different skin color than you. Love thy neighbor that dresses differently than you. And I'm saying this again because of judgment. Love thy neighbor that struggles differently than you. Let us do the hard work that Jesus has called on each and one of us to do. On each and one of us to do. Grab your heavy cross, put it on your shoulder, and if for whatever reason you need help, because it's a bit heavy, ask your neighbor to help carry your cross. Nothing bad with that. Get to know your neighbor. Love your neighbor more genuinely, not generally. Until the day that when instead of seeing the faces of neighbors, we see Jesus. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Amen.